Tuesday edition of Golf Business Live. Again, I'm Jay Karen, CEO of the National Golf Course Owners Association, coming to you from the Mobile Command Center on Daniel Island, also known as my guest bedroom and home office. But we are keeping things together at the association. As a reminder to folks who are watching who might not be familiar with NGCOA, we are the trade association for the golf course part of the industry. It's an $84 billion industry, and about 70 billion of that centers on what happens at the golf course. And today we have a couple special guests with me today. We have Congressman Joe Cunningham, who is an attorney here in Charleston, but a member of the House of Representatives representing District 1 in South Carolina, elected in 2018 as a Democrat in a fairly red district. First time since 1986 that a Democrat has held the seat in District 1, but recently named the most bipartisan freshman in Congress. I don't know if that's is that an honor, Joe? I guess it is.
Right? Absolutely. You know, it's something we ran on, and you know, I think that when I go across the district, talk to folks, they just want somebody who will answer to the district and think for themselves as opposed to answering to a party. So it's something I'm particularly proud of, something we ran on, and I'm just being exactly who I said I'd be whenever we start off in this venture. So thanks again for having me, Jay.
Yeah, Joe, appreciate you being here. And everybody at home, I can call him Joe because I live in District 1, and that's what we do. We also have with us, although he disappeared from screen, he's coming back on, Roger Warren. Let's see, where are you, Roger?
May have to cue the soundtrack again for him.
There he is. All right. Hey, Roger.
You know, I thought, man, I'm cool. I've got it. And you came up and I lost everything. So at least I found my way back.
All right. Roger Warren, president of Kiawah Island Golf Resort. Has been president of the resort since 2005. Past president of the PGA of America, member of the PGA Golf Professional Hall of Fame, and most importantly, an NGCOA advisory board member. Roger, thank you. Kiawah is in District 1, so we thought we would bring a local business here to the conversation because we've got a lot to talk about, you know, what's happening in the golf industry and in America in general. And I assume you guys have had the chance to meet before this this Golf Business Live format, right?
We have had the opportunity to meet Joe in Washington in his office.
Fantastic. All right. Well, tell you what, we've got some folks at home that are tuning in, and there's a Q&A module that they can type in some questions that, if there's time, I'll facilitate questions kind of from the audience. And Joe, these could be course owners from all over the country, who knows? But we'll see if we have time for that. And just as a reminder to my fellow panelists that we'll be sending this recording out to all golf courses throughout the United States. About 14,000 golf course operators will get a link to our episode. So Roger, be careful what you say. You know, this is being recorded. All right, so guys, you know, first I want to start with Roger and just say, you know, walk us through what's been happening at Kiawah, and you know, since all this started, and how you guys are getting through, and what's happening with the resort.
Well, I think like everybody, this has been an experience that I don't think anyone can prepare you for. I've been in the golf business for almost 50 years, and I don't remember having to deal with anything quite like this. I think, like everyone, when we got to a point that we had to acknowledge that we were going to have to close our business and that we were going to have to deal with getting through this pandemic, the hardest part was we have about this time of the year about 1,300 employees, and we had to furlough 1,100 of them, and that. You know, you think that's a pretty big number, but they're all people we know and who have had to go through a lot of challenges, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I think that we actually are seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. Our villa business is now back and running at about 35 to 40% occupancy. We're going to open our hotel on June 4th. We've got 3 of our 5 golf courses open, with the 4th opening this weekend, and then 1 week later we'll open the 5th. So we do have people playing golf. Obviously, it's a game of golf that is bereft of a lot of the accoutrements you normally have with it. But the best thing about it is those people who are playing are enjoying it and having fun. And it's been a great diversion to all of the things that we've had to deal with. And I think that's the best comment we get from the people. Many of them are members as we go through this time. So I think that as difficult as it's also been a very good learning experience. And I think that we're all figuring out that when we were operating with such a small group of people, we've all figured out we could do more than we had normally done. And we've been doing a lot of that. But I'm happy to say that we are moving forward, and hopefully we'll keep moving forward as this pandemic begins to ease going forward.
From a leadership education standpoint, yeah, I have a quote that I keep near my desk. It says, "A smooth sea never made a skillful sailor." Right? I mean, I've learned my best lessons as an executive through the most difficult times. Even though you don't want to go through them while you're going through them, you learn so much. So I think you're right. And a lot of small businesses out there are getting, pulled through the ringer. And so they're certainly learning new things about themselves and their operations. So, well, we appreciate you sharing, Roger, what's happening. I know it's not easy. There are human beings and people involved in this, and tough decisions have to be made. But we appreciate what Kiawah does for the Low Country, no question. And we may close out the questioning here to see how things are going with the PGA Championship. Well, I'm free advertising today, on the 2021 PGA Championship. But so Congressman Cunningham. So what I've done is I've cobbled together a few notes from golf courses around the country as it relates to kind of the CARES Act, which everybody was focused in on, obviously, as the immediate relief effort for small businesses, and considerations for the next phase. It's just some stories that came out of the first wave of support was some of the, especially with the payroll protection program, that some golf courses were finding it very difficult to hit that 75% payroll requirement because it's happening in their down season. By the time the money comes in, they may be a seasonal business, and it's kind of an 8-week window, to make all this happen. And just, for a small business, that it may not be enough. It may get them through a few weeks or what have you, but the requirements around that were it's difficult for some businesses. And I'll rattle off a couple more, and I want to hear what your take is on some of this. Like the 8 weeks of funding goes quickly, right? Real quickly. And so how, I know that there's the HEROES Act was, passed the House, and I know you voted against it, and there's some legitimate reasons I want you to share, but but the bottom line was that a lot of businesses that are out there that saw problems with the first go around of funding. How do you feel about the legislation that passed? Any remedies that you would support that could come out of Congress? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, I voted against this most recent $3 trillion stimulus package because, I think the country economically is in real trouble, and there's too much at stake for simply a one-side approach. I think we need to have people coming together, Democrats and Republicans, sitting down at the table and working this out. I'll be the first to admit the CARES Act was not perfect. That's the first $2 trillion bill that was signed into law by the president. There were some shortcomings of it, particularly, as you mentioned, the 8-week period in which businesses had to allocate a certain amount to pay their employees. Well, in reality, a lot of businesses aren't able to meet that threshold simply because the business is not there. And this is particularly true in the food and bev industry. So maybe in some of the restaurants or bars associated with golf facilities, it does make a lot of sense to pay bartenders or servers to come in and stare at empty chairs, until our economy is fully opened back up, and until people feel comfortable going out and spending money, then a lot of businesses may not be able to make that 75-25 threshold. So what we propose and what I've done is sign on the letters and request leadership take that into consideration and expand that 8-week period to something 16, 24 weeks further on down the road, that gives the businesses, including golf courses, a lot more flexibility on meeting those requirements of the PPP. But I thought that this latest attempt just fell short. It had some good parts to it, one of which did extend the 8-week period, but at the end of the day, it had an enormous price tag on it. I don't think it did enough to help small businesses. It expanded stimulus checks to non-U.S. Citizens, and those are a lot of things that I couldn't support in the package. So, but I am hopeful, though, Jay. You take a look back at what we've done in the past in getting the CARES Act, the $2 trillion spending bill, across the finish line and to the president's desk for signature. I think we can do it again. I think we can go back and address some of these, missteps or errors in the CARES Act, and and give businesses a little bit more flexibility in spending that money. But it's going to take Democrats and Republicans coming together, sitting down at the same table, and it's going to take some bipartisanship. And as you mentioned, it's a record like ours that of consistent bipartisanship, which I think is going to bring this thing to fruition.
Do you think the Senate's going to chew this up, or and if so, what do you think they're going to want to see in a piece of legislation in order for it to pass the litmus test?
I think it's DOA in the Senate. I don't think it's going to grow any legs over there. However, one thing it may do is it may inspire Mitch McConnell and other senators to recognize that there are some things in the CARES Act that maybe tied the hands of golf course owners or small business owners, and that need to be addressed. I mean, we hear from constituents every single day, and so our economy here in the Low Country and in South Carolina does depend highly on tourism, the food and bev industry. People come here because it's beautiful. They want to spend their money here, and we want to encourage people to come back, spend their money, come to Kiawah, spend money on the golf courses and such. So, but they can only do that if these businesses, these courses are open for business, and they continue to flourish. So, hopefully, if this latest HEROES Act that's passed the House if it did nothing else other than inspire the Senate to take some reasonable steps into working with the House and crafting legislation that fixes some of these problems, then that's good too.
Good. So Roger was president of the PGA of America right around the time, I think, when NGCOA and PGA and the club managers and golf course superintendents got together and created an organization called We Are Golf. And the point of this collaboration was to share our industry story with Washington, because at the time of Hurricane Katrina, there was disaster relief legislation that passed following Katrina. And when that legislation passed, it disqualified from receiving disaster relief funding the golf industry, among other industries that are kindly referred to as the sin list of industries. Right. Casinos, massage parlors. I mean, this was written in the 1970s, this the tax code stuff. I mean, hot tub facilities. I mean, I don't even know what the hell that is. This, so Roger's, well-versed as well as I am on this sinless issue. When disaster relief legislation is passed like this, when you guys are batting this around Congress, it's as though winners and losers are chosen. These are businesses or industries that are not worthy for one reason or another, and so forth. And golf gets very nervous around disaster relief legislation time, because we've had a history of being specifically called out and excluded for eligibility. And this time with the CARES Act, the golf industry was not mentioned, as excluded. So that was good. So all the public golf courses out there that are of a certain size had availability to some of this. But there were a couple of categories that still got exempted from qualification on some of the payroll protection money. In particular, nonprofits that are C6 organizations, trade associations, state, local, national organizations that work for industries that are in the conventions business. I mean, Rogers the Kiawah, the Sanctuary, does a lot of conferences and events. Well, if those associations can't put on the events, then the revenue, spigot gets turned off. And so, I think that the HEROES Act was trying to remedy that for C6s and C7s. C7s, there are about 2,000 clubs in our industry that are organized under the C7 tax status of nonprofit. And, the challenge is that, as you know, Joe, this legislation was passed to support the employees. It was really, it's payroll protection. And when we pick winners and losers, then you're really hurting the people. The bartender at the club is no different than the bartender down at Juanita Greenberg's down on King Street, right? So how the pandemic is a bit indiscriminate, but how does Congress inject how do you figure out this discriminate versus indiscriminate nature of who gets to participate and who doesn't?
I heard someone reference in a recent meeting, this is before the pandemic hit, that Congress sometimes will take a sledgehammer to a problem instead of a scalpel. And I think that, with such broad and sweeping legislation, as I said before, it's not perfect. And I think when we're going back and we start receiving phone calls and letters and hearing from constituents, you realize that there are some folks that may have been left behind, and the C6s are exact, example of that. Whether it be the Charleston County Visitors Bureau or other organizations like that, they need the support too. And that's why I signed on to a letter to leadership asking that the next package address C6s and include those groups in this relief bill as well. And that's why I'm cautiously optimistic that the Senate will move on something, or at least come to the table and recognize that, hey, there are some people who may have been, unintentionally left out that we need to go back and remedy. And hopefully that'll encourage people to come back to the table. So, but when we hear about things like this, that's why we flag it for leadership. We put it in writing, and to let them know that this is what we're hearing from our constituents. And that's what we're trying to act as a channel from the 1st District to the halls of Congress and take those concerns directly to them.
There's one possibly unintended consequence of all of this. I mean, there are a lot of consequences from what's happening. And I want Roger to talk a little bit about it, because he's has some history on the H2B visa program in the United States. And so, Roger, if you don't mind, kind of share with the congressman about a little bit of your history with the program and what your involvement and real experience has been, where the rubber hits the road on H2B visas, and maybe the unintended consequences that could happen with a higher unemployment rate.
Well, interestingly, the first time Joe and I ever met was when I went to his office to talk about the H2B program, and we were a few months ago. The H2B program is a seasonal foreign worker program that provides American employers with seasonal workers that they can't find anywhere else. And the unfortunate thing about this pandemic is, with 36 million unemployed people right now, it is counterintuitive to think that an employer would need a foreign worker program of any kind, but specifically the H2B program, to be able to operate their business as they get back open. And the reality of it is that because of the nature of the program, as a seasonal business, it's usually the people who use it are people who are in locations where, either because of the remoteness of their location or the challenge of the market they're in for employees, that it is a program that they depend on in their season to get their business to be successful. And it supports the American workers that they already have in their program, so that the business can thrive. The challenge is right now that this has become a political football, as the congressman's aware, and a lot of the people who are anti-immigration conflate the H2B program with that. And so they're not willing to look at the program for what it was. It was designed to be a support program for American employers who can't find Americans. It is a program administered by the Department of Labor, and the Department of Labor certifies that the employer has a real and valid need for that employee, that seasonal employee from a foreign country, because they've gone out and they've advertised for the employee for over 30 days to qualify. And the reality of it is, at that point, they haven't been able to find anyone. This is a program that probably in the future, as we look to get it to be more viable, needs to be completely managed by the Department of Labor, and let them determine the need and determine the amount of employees that are needed. But right now, there are employers, even with 36 million unemployed people, that cannot find American workers to do the jobs they need on a seasonal basis. That's the reality. Nobody really wants to believe it. All of us who use the program, we've been involved with the program for the last 17 years. I would prefer to have all of my employees be American employees. I would like to see all of them come from the local Charleston area, work for us year in and year out on a seasonal basis, but we can't find them. So this is a program that's vital, and I appreciate the Congressman's support on this in the past, and look forward for that support going forward, because it is a program that is important to small business owners around the country to be able to survive with their business.
Joe, could you see, with a higher unemployment rate, some folks in Washington and the White House or what have you saying, all right, let's turn it off. Let's turn off the H2B visa program because we have 36 million unemployed Americans. Do you foresee that happening? What can we do to try to educate folks that that's still not going to be good enough to fill these jobs?
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to echo what Roger had said and let everyone know that I'll continue to support the stance on H2Bs and the need for those at golf courses. I don't really see the correlation there, Jay, to be honest. And I think anybody who's trying to associate, I mean, Americans weren't feeling, as Roger said, Americans weren't feeling these jobs before. They're not going to after as well. This reaches beyond golf courses too. But I think we know it all too well here in the Low Country. So, I'm sure there have been some people who are trying to reduce this cap, but we're going to continue to echo and amplify what we hear from folks back home and golf course owners. The fact is there is a need. There will continue being a need for it. And folks need to recognize the residual benefit of this on our economy. I've heard from, and like I said, it doesn't relate just to golf courses. It spills over into restaurants, hotels, other types of visas, seasonal work permits, where you want all 36 holes open. And some people may be struggling to open 18. So you need the workers there to make sure that you're operating at full capacity. Right. For your business, whether it be a golf course, a hotel, a restaurant, or whatever. Yeah, I mean, Jay, people make all kinds of arguments up in Washington, D.C., so it wouldn't surprise me. However, we're going to continue to maintain the same position and be consistent.
Good. I think we need to prepare for it because I have a feeling that I could see that logically coming. But obviously a segue maybe to the travel and tourism discussion, because a lot of travel and tourism industry relies on H2B visas. But, the travel industry is really the U.S.'s #1 export business. And it's greatly damaged, obviously, by COVID-19. And travel-related jobs represent 38% of all the job loss through April. It's worse than the Great Depression and 9/11 as far as the impact on travel. The travel industry unemployment rate is at 51% right now. That's shocking when I read that number from the U.S. Travel Association. So Roger, let me ask you, how important to Kiawah is the foreign visitor to your business, or to the state of South Carolina for that matter?
Well, I'd like to support the idea that foreign travel is really important to us, but frankly, our business is measured by the amount of American visitors we have. We have had enhanced growth over the last year because we've had flights from British Air come into Charleston, which has been really a direct one-stop flight from London, which is going to help us in the future. We haven't been able to bear all the fruit of it yet, but it's going to help us in the future. But our market is nationwide. It's drive, it's fly, and all of that. Right now, clearly, as we evaluate what we think is going to happen in the future, our first travelers back are going to be those who can drive here and who can get here and feel safe. All of us in the golf business, in the travel business, we're all about right now, what do we do to make sure that the people who want to come and visit our facilities will feel safe, that we have gone and reached out and made sure that we're going to protect them and do everything we can to protect them from preventing them getting touched by this pandemic. And that is a challenge. That's something that although we all work hard at cleanliness, this is another level. We have here at the resort, we've gotten into a partnership with the Medical University of South Carolina, and they brought a team in, and they have evaluated all of our facilities, all of our operational standards, all of our cleaning standards. They've given us recommendations, and they're going to certify that we are in a position to protect people as they come in. And I think that outside third-party verification will help everybody. And most local hospitals and things will help business owners do that so that we can feel like we're all helping with this. So, but you hit it right on the head, Jay. With the travel and leisure business right now and the golf business right now, we are facing the stiffest headwinds that we've had in a long time, even more so than prior events. And so our ability to find our way through it is going to depend upon the ingenuity of the people and the effort of the people who are involved in the ownership. But we're going to need support. We're going to need community support, local government support that will help us all see a way through here. And it's going to take a team effort. We're not going to do it individually because there's too many things that are out of our individual control.
Yeah, I agree. Speaking of, government support of travel and tourism, Joe, I believe you voted to reauthorize Brand USA in 2019 through 2027, which is essentially America's, DMO, Destination Marketing Organization, to get foreign, folks to come to the United States, spend their money here, and allow travel to continue to be the #1 export, if you will. So, how should Congress or Washington kind of look to balance the safety and security of the country with regard to the pandemic, and also keep the business and recreation turnstiles open to foreign travelers? I mean, how do you thread that needle?
Well, it's a balancing act, obviously. We can't really just view one of those in a silo. I think the focus is obviously, first and foremost, always on the public health and safety. But as we've gotten this virus under control, we started to look at what things we can ease up on to start opening back up the economy. And Brand USA is just a great example of a program that works, and that the ROI on it is exceptional. And you can just look at Charleston, with the fact that how successful it's been at our airport, and as far as the influx of international visitors. But it is frightening to see the hit that we've taken recently. The traffic in Charleston Airport was down like 96%. And I remember flying up to DC a few weeks ago. I was walking through the airport. It was at 1:30 in the afternoon, and it was like a ghost town. All the shops were shuttered. I was on a plane with 8 other people up to Washington, D.C. But when I came back this most recent trip, I did see it starting to pick up. So, but as we begin to open up businesses, as we begin to open up back up the economy, it's important that we take a look at what programs are actually working, which ones are providing an ROI, and preserve those, or maybe even enhance them.
Yeah, what I love most about Brand USA, I was on the board of the U.S. Travel Association when that passed through Congress and the White House, is that it's not paid for by the American taxpayers.
Right.
It's on the visa fees coming in from foreign workers or foreign travelers. So, well, we appreciate your support on that. I'm gonna segue to a different topic, although it's related a little bit to what Roger was talking about with MUSC, and kind of checking out the safety and cleanliness and sanitization standards and so forth. Is this whole question of safe harbor and liability for businesses, because many business owners are communicating serious concern about taking on liability and risk with regard to litigation from customers who claim, they contracted COVID at the operations. Can you imagine, Roger, if some golfer says, "Oh, the caddy got too close to me, and he coughed 3 times, and while we played our round, and 2 weeks later this guy finds out he has COVID and then sues the resort," or what have you. So, a serious concern out there. This is not like, businesses don't feel necessarily responsible for preventing the flu from being spread at their facility, or, the common cold. There's no liability in that case. But in this case with COVID, there's no cure. It's a communicable disease, right? And so there's a lot of fear around the table as to how, what happens. And so, I know states are looking to pass laws to protect businesses from litigation on this. How is Congress debating the matter?
Well, right now, Jay, there's a few things being tossed around, but under the present case right now, and as you saw, there's the HEROES Act that's recently passed. We're still waiting on what the Senate wants to do, and I think our priorities right now are fixing some of the loopholes and some of the things within the HEROES Act that need to be addressed, specifically with the PPP. But for the time being, I think each state's going to have to follow the rule of law in their own state, and case law and is different from state to state. The standard of care may vary from different place, but if there's a case that comes up, it's just gonna have to be basically you just have to apply the law in the given jurisdiction. There's no federal guidance that's been codified at this point, and honestly, I think we'd have to be hearing a lot more feedback, especially from medical professionals, on this before we even start to begin to develop a new standard of care for this. So, for the time being, like I said, I think businesses just have to rely on the law in their own state. And I think it's time to also revisit, whatever insurance policies you may have, and the direction under your insurance carrier, to find out what is covered as far as any types of liability.
Roger, do you share any concerns that some of the business owners do out there about the liability that now is being talked about that maybe didn't exist before?
I'm not surprised that people are talking about the liability. We live in a time, those of us who manage our own businesses understand that we're always going to be a target of litigation. And litigation defense becomes part of your business plan. Because whether you're guilty or not, when you are sued, you're going to pay something. In our current legal system, you're going to pay something, whether it's your attorney, it's a settlement, or you're going to go to court and you win and then you pay legal fees, or you lose and you pay. When you get sued, you're going to pay. And so there is one field of thought that we need to look at that litigation system. And that's been going on for a long time. I don't see any chance it's going to change at this point. But I do believe that all of us have to take every best effort we can to put ourselves into a position of doing what we think is the right thing to protect our employees, the right thing to protect our guests who come here. If you can get third-party endorsement for what you're doing and you follow the plan, it's like anything about liability and negligence, and I know that the congressman's an attorney, so he understands all of that. You get to a point where you do everything you can to do it right, and then eventually you have to make a decision as to whether you want to defend yourself in court or if you want to settle. And settlement isn't an admission of guilt in many cases. It's just a business decision about which is the best way to go. Yeah. That's the situation we're in, and this environment of this pandemic is like many other circumstances. Some people use as an opportunity to litigate, but many people won't. So I think you just have to do the best you can to do the right thing and protect yourself from something that could be called negligence and move on.
Yeah, I think it's a very point what Roger's saying. And now, you look at best practices, you look at what advice and guidance is being pushed by the CDC so that you can have something to cite back to or fall back on. Whenever a golf course facility said, I took all these necessary steps, or I took all these precautions. That's why I said earlier, look at what the experts are saying, what the medical professionals are saying, so that you can lean on that, God forbid, something arises later on.
Yeah, something you may not know about, Joe, it's funny you mentioned the CDC, is that the golf industry came together recently and had the CDC basically come to the table with us, led by the PGA of America, this initiative, but all the associations were together. We basically said, hey, listen, CDC, if you were to run a golf course, what would be your operational playbook during this pandemic? What would be, phase one, the most restrictive phase, phase two, phase three, based on the White House 3-phase plan to get back into business? And that's exactly what we did, Joe. We came out with this operational playbook that was reviewed by the CDC and physicians there, pretty high up folks to say this is, and they know nothing about golf. It's like, but this is what we would do if we were operating a golf course, essentially. So we've got that out there in the marketplace. It's called Back to Golf. And so we're proud of what's out there as guidance for golf course operators. You mentioned, state law here in this case, this is maybe a constitutional question, right? Because it's like, all right, what's come up in discussion is where federal authority stops and state authority begins in some of this stuff. A pandemic knows no line drawn on a map. Right? There's no, it doesn't, those viruses don't understand that. And yet the Constitution was written in the 18th century and it gave states certain powers and so forth. If we could go back in time to January and this was still coming, do you see, would there be a shift in authority so that this could all be handled in a standardized fashion? Or do you still think that kind of the states get to make most of all the shots that are happening out there with regard to businesses opening and closing and all of these things? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a fan that the state should have the authority to conduct certain things that I mean, and the Bill of Rights, Constitution says the same thing, that anything not specified within that is reserved for the states. I'm also a big proponent of what happens in their local communities. I've backed the local communities, especially the Isle ones here, whether it be Isle Palm, Sullivan's, or Folly, to make the decisions that what's best for their own constituents. Kiawah, and other places, it's just not all the same. The situation that Roger may be facing over in Kiawah is probably a hell of a lot different than what's maybe faced up in Bamberg, South Carolina. So I think I think some autonomy among municipalities and especially among states is a good thing. And we're going to, we've seen this thing develop and we've seen hotspots flare up. And so it's not all areas, not all businesses, golf courses should be penalized necessarily because a hotspot flares up hundreds of miles or thousands of miles away. So, I think that most people, most folks are handling this the best way they can given the circumstances. Hindsight is always 20/20. We can Monday morning quarterback this thing and figure out like who made the right call. But I don't know if there's if it's very productive. It's I think that the governor, the mayors are doing what they feel is best given the circumstances, and they're trying to.
I appreciate that. We'll close out on one topic, another law of unintended consequences. And Roger, you tell me if you've seen this yet at Kiawah or not, but this, in states where, and I'm bringing this up because if there's a second wave of the pandemic that rolls through, then we're gonna have to revisit some of the closures and what has happened. In the golf industry, we're hearing from golf courses that we're under these restrictions of, okay, you know what, we'll let you open up in our state, but you can only walk, no golf cars. And which is, there's a reason for that, right? That way people aren't sharing golf cars, touching surfaces and so forth. But those that with disabilities under the Americans with Disabilities Act, they usually get to ride on a golf course. And if a governor says, sorry, no riding, and the federal government under ADA says you're allowed accommodation to ride, it kind of created this, oh my gosh, what do I do moment? And, and I don't know, did you see any of that, Roger, at Kiawah, where you had walking only restrictions and those with disabilities kind of saying, what about me?
Well, we didn't do walking only. And if we violated the governor, I wasn't aware of it. And that's an unintended
I'm talking about Michigan.
It's an unintended consequence in its own, but we...
Just plead the fifth there, Roger. Just plead the fifth there.
I'm gonna. But I think what you're talking about, Jay, is that there were a lot of things we went through here that nobody had an experience with. And so there were mistakes made. And in hindsight, yeah, we wouldn't have done it that way, but I don't think anybody made decisions with the intent to do something, hurt anybody or do anything wrong. And I think that as we've gone through it now, we've figured out there were a lot of good decisions that were made. Maybe the decision of not putting trash cans out wasn't a very good one because there was no place to put the trash. But in the end, I think that I'm very proud of the golf industry particularly because of the positive impact that we have had on people's mindset on what's going on and the opportunity to get outside and enjoy something. And I think that it's hard in the middle of something like this to have a perspective that maybe doesn't go mainstream because you're almost afraid to say something that isn't mainstream because people think you don't care. But I think when we look back and evaluate this, some of this has been overreaction. Others, but it's been overreaction for the right reason because we're afraid we're afraid we're going to hurt somebody. But I see right now people are really excited about getting outside. And I truly believe that Americans make the effort to do the right thing, and you're seeing it everywhere. And sometimes people look at other people and think they're not doing it the right way, and they want to share that with them, and that leads to conflict. But on balance, we're getting through this, and we're doing it the right way, and we'll come out on the other side better for it. So I'm an optimist about where we're going, and I think you can only get through this by having that kind of optimism.
I do appreciate that. Joe, any closing words for the small business owners out there in the golf industry?
No, I agree with what Roger just said, and I think that the golf industry has provided good service to folks because we do have to think about not only people's physical health but people's mental health as well. When people are relegated to their own homes and confined, and golf provides a way to get out and get exercise, be outdoors, and do it in a safe and healthy manner. So. Appreciate the service all the golf course owners that may be on this call provide. I want to thank you again, Jay, for giving me the opportunity to come on here. Thank Roger for what he's doing out there, and I'm looking forward to the PGA next year, and excited to get out there and hopefully be a part of that. I just want again, I think Roger hit the nail on the head that we will get through this, and we're going to be better because of it. I think we're handling this, as best we can under the circumstances, and knowing what we know at the moment. We can always Monday morning quarterback and look back on this, but again, I think we're moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll get to the other side here soon.
Good. Well, gentlemen, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. Joe, I look forward to seeing you at one of Charleston's great breweries, maybe up at Common House Ale Works up in Park Circle. We can meet up there and have a beer. Roger, Carrie, and I look forward to having dinner with you and Mary sometime soon again. We can split a nice bottle of wine. So, guys, I appreciate you joining today. Stay safe, and thanks for all that you guys do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys.